Koviki talk. That's what's up.
I know.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's another Monday. It's the same idea. We get to talk to amazing people at the end of our Monday. Every Monday, nothing changes with that. But it is season two, episode one of the second season of Koviki Talk. Nothing changes. It's still Pacific Islanders talking to Pacific Islanders about COVID-19, and everything right now is the try to get to herd immunity and what's our role in that, and how do
Mhm.
we learn more and get better information to make more informed decisions. So, oh man, I was going to introduce Dr. Samoa because it was unpaid intern, but he's too quick for me and he already changed his name. So why
Oh,
don't you
I,
go?
I didn't change it.
Yeah, but he misspelled his
Oh,
own name.
we
It's
have
an
a
A, not an
producer.
O.
Ah. So,
Where?
Naki, why don't you introduce our esteemed guest from up north, our superstar from Pikawa?
Our superstar, Joseph Seia, was born in Los Angeles, California, grew up on Tutuila and Upolu Islands with his Ainga and Samoa, and eventually emigrated to Duwamish Coast, Salish territory with his father, Aitulangi Yosefa, and his siblings in 1994. He has 15 years of experience of direct service and youth development work, anti racist community organizing, and nonprofit leadership and administration. Joseph champions system change work that centers the leadership and history of the most impacted communities. He is committed to ending the impacts of systemic racism through coalition building, centering anti racism principles, and creating intergenerational leadership opportunities to co design our beloved community. Joseph is Fafafine. He is a fierce advocate for QTBIPOC communities. He works actively against the political erasure of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander communities and will continue to provide soul labor in re envisioning what it means for NHPI people to feel cultural belonging. Joseph currently co chairs the National NHPI Policy Council and also co chairs the local Undoing Institutional Racism Collaborative in King County and is the founder and executive director of PICOA. Thank you, Joseph, for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neki.
And our next guest is Dr. Raynold Samoa. Dr. Samoa is a clinical research endocrinologist. He has a lifelong fascination with obesity related disorders and has parlayed that interest into research projects in investigating the metabolic conditions that affect populations vulnerable to diabetes, such as Pacific Islanders and cancer survivors. Dr. Raynold Samoa received his medical degree from the University of Washington. He did his adult
For
endocrinology
communities
fellowship
and will
at
continue.
the Los Angeles County University of Southern California and his pediatric endocrinology fellowship at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Dr. Samoa is the clinical lead for the National Pacific Islander COVID-19 response team. The team is composed of 10 different regional task forces from around the country and includes states such as California, Washington, Hawaii, Arkansas, Utah, and Arizona. Currently, he is an assistant clinical professor at the City of Hope Medical Center in Duarte, California. Welcome, Dr. Samoa.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Naki.
Yay!
So we always start the Koviki talk off with a question, and I wasn't sure what the question was going to be, but since the FICA podcast, which Naki and I are hosts of, we don't go very long without talking about food. Joseph and I were already talking about food in the pre-show. So the question is, what was the last thing that you cooked, that you made in your kitchen at home? And Naki's making that face, so we'll give her one person to go, then we'll come to Naki. So, Joseph, you and I were already talking about what I made. What's the last thing that you made in your own kitchen?
That's a really sad question, Carl. And this is why I started the keto diet. I'm getting back on being a ketonesian this week so that I can be a little bit more intentional about making food in the kitchen. I have not done food in the kitchen for the last month and a half. Sorry, I don't remember.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm making sandwiches over here, so I'm not. There's no chefology going on at my house. Naki, we're gonna let you go next because usually you go last. So we'll put.
Ooh. The last thing I made is this awful? A bagel. I made I made a bagel with cream cheese for breakfast and coffee. Is that work? I'm awful. We have like salads or we had Thai food yesterday at the Thai food place that we all
Um,
had.
yeah, that's funny that um, mine is a sandwich, right? When I say cook, I'm like whatever I make in my kitchen, I'm going to consider cooking because if it has to actually do with ingredients and all that kind of stuff, I don't know what the last thing is I made. But we'll head down to Duarte and see what Dr. Samoa made last in his kitchen. I'm betting it's something healthy.
Mm, not. I don't even. I'm like Joseph. I don't remember the last thing I made. Um, I think I'm with you, Carl. I made an egg sandwich for breakfast. Uh, that was about. That's as much action as my kitchen saw this weekend.
I know.
It's a show with a bunch of Pacific Islanders, Samoans on it, and there is no panipopo, there's no palusami, there's no. It's like what we eat out, and we made a sandwich. Sandwiches is about the most entailed thing that we have today. On our question of the day, so we'll just move on and talk about COVID-19 because that's what we're here for. One of the things we want to continue to do is champion things that are working and things that we can look at and say, what does right look like? Right looks like what's going on in King County. So we can't talk about that enough in terms of where the rubber meets the road is community-based organizations and leaders that are trusted and have roots in the community, and that's really how we move the needle in terms of vaccination when it was time to test. The test rates were high. So going back into that, and I know, Joseph, you've talked about this a lot, but when we are trying to model in other areas the things that you've done in King County, we really want to know like what is the ingredient that goes into it besides hard work. We all know it's hard work. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to hear, the methods to success because we know you're working hard, whether it's with COVID-19 or anything else. So, talk a little bit about the things that have made you successful and made the community successful in King County.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Yeah, so as far as like vaccine equity, I mean, we've been at this with the national team from the get-go, right? Making sure that, even with the National Academy of Science, that they were writing us in there, right, as the most impacted community when states were considering what their efforts were going to look like, on the ground. I think for Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander people, like a lot of us did not have buildings for our CBOs, and if we did, we were just at the preliminary stages of growing, right? And so there weren't actual like spaces or places to do the interventions, right? So we really had to be creative with the partnerships that we did. And so we see a lot of beautiful work that comes out of the National Pacific Islander COVID team, and really seeing Pacifica people be super creative about the solutions that they were putting forth for vaccine equity. But at the core of it is our commitment to, we are the stewards of our own health, right? That we're working within a white, racist, a system that has systemically erased Pacific Islander peoples in data and also in funding and in resources. And so, given that, so what are the things that we have, in our networks that we can make sure that our community knows that they can access for their well-being, right? So it's just been, people going back to old school values, pulling resources, pulling connections, and everything that we have to do this. I know in OPIC in Oregon, the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition has done an excellent job in Monoma County. I know Kekoa and Tao in Northern California have been doing tremendous work in vaccine equity. Our team in Utah has been doing a tremendous work with Jake Samanu and those guys there. So I think it feels really good to know that you're doing good work and also your team is doing good work. And I feel like that's been fueling the fire here in Washington State.
Awesome. I think that a lot of it, I would think, comes from being trusted when this all started, right? You didn't just start organizations and garner the trust of the community all of a sudden. I mean, you're either involved with it and trusted when these things come down, or you know, you kind of get the side eye of like, who are you and why are you showing up now? And that's kind of one of the things that I think the Pacific Islander community is unique in a way that the government could pour a ton of money into trying to help us with health problems, and we need it. But if we don't have the community-based organizations on the ground pouring money into it, isn't you can't just from a governmental standpoint throw money in it and hope it goes away. You've got to have stewards of the messages and trusted members of the community to get into the community. It's not like it's just unique in that sense. Dr. Samoa, from a data standpoint, do you find that this is true from the sense of gathering our own data is kind of up to us to go do it because there's money out there, but it just won't reach us unless there's some people in between to be the conduit between government, money, community. Talk a little bit about that, because I know like Joseph has talked about being, you know, having a direction, be a steward of our own ship, right? And data is a big piece of that. So can you talk a little bit about, from your standpoint, the key piece, like what role the community-based organizations play with data?
Yeah, I mean, they're instrumental, you know. Before, you know, we were getting data on rates. So we got data on, and not, it wasn't uniform, you know, like only, I believe it's about 22 states report disaggregated data. So that's, you know, a lot of states that don't.
Right.
28 states don't report any NHPI data. And, you know, even less than that report mortality, you know, people who died from COVID. And so, you know, these rates were important for us to show that we were at specific risk. But that's only sort of the first layer of it. You know, what comes after sort of like showing that there's a health problem in the community are all the things that can attribute or help cause the disease to have such a bad impact in a community. And, you know, this has been sort of a growing trend. I think it was Dr. Yancey, Clarence Yancey reported COVID-19 in African Americans in JAMA near the beginning of the pandemic. And everyone started talking about the disproportionate rates of COVID in communities of color. And right after that came, well, the reason why they're at such high risk was all these social determinants of health, you know, like lack of poor insured rates, lack of education, all these things that have troubled us in the past caused COVID to be so bad in our communities. But we didn't have any information on it. You know, we had very little data regarding what makes COVID, what's driving COVID in our communities. And just recently, you know, we just finished the national survey, and that was done 100% on the backs of our community-based organizations. You know, without them, we would have no data. You know, and so now we know that a large percentage of our population is hesitant to get the vaccine. You know, and the group that has a high percentage of essential workers, the 25 to 44 year age group, they're the highest risk. You know, they don't want to get the vaccine. I think it's about 43% or somewhere along those lines that don't want to get the vaccine. So, you know, that's a huge problem on our part. The other thing that we've noticed from this survey and what's been coming about is those places that have a strong community presence, you know, like Washington, you know, Pikawa, OPIC in Oregon, they have high vaccination rates, you know, and I believe the NHPI vaccination rate in King County, Joseph, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like greater than 70%. And in Oregon, it's greater than 80%. So, you know, this high rate of hesitancy is getting combated. we're fighting that with a strong community presence. So, if there's any sort of trend that's going through this pandemic, it has been the strength of our community to meet our needs. you know. And so I'll be telling that to everybody and anybody for the next 5 to 10 years. Luckily for me, I have the data to back it up.
Is there anything from that survey, Dr. Samoa, that was a surprise to you, or is it just basically information we all knew? We just needed to get it in writing. Was there anything that surprised you about the survey?
Well, I think it was good to quantify it. Like, I knew there was some vaccine hesitancy, but to get some solid numbers around that, that was good. I knew people were affected financially from COVID.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad it was until the numbers came out. In a lot of populations, about 70% of our population suffered some type of economic loss during the pandemic. What else did we find out? We found out there's a high rate of mental health problems going on in our community. A lot of communities reported, about 40% of the respondents in a lot of the ethnic groups reported some episode of anxiety or depression during the pandemic. And so, the reason why it's important to officially have numbers around this is because people don't fund guesses, right? They don't fund opinions. When you have the data in front of them and say, hey, this is what's affecting our people, then it becomes, the failure is on their part for not producing resources to meet those needs.
And Joseph, can I ask you, like Washington and like we said, over 70% of King County has been vaccinated. What is the key to your success? Like, how do you get all of our community, or most of them, in the chair to get them vaccinated? Like, what can you share that, California can use, and New Mexico and Texas?
Yeah, I think it's really, how do we activate the leadership of our whole community, right? How do we look at our community as an asset, right? As the trusted messengers that they are, and all of the different languages that they do speak, right? And then also, how do you turn our community from just being volunteers at these efforts to all folks that are actually being paid for the work that they're doing? So, it's how do we sustain the funding for these efforts, right? If there's no money that support these efforts, we can have a lot of hope, right?
Right.
But I don't know where that typing noise is coming from.
Where is that typing noise coming from?
Yeah.
Somebody's taking really good notes, and
yeah, they are.
We should be taking really good
Not
notes.
me.
But yeah, I think it's a sustain effort to educate funders that will then fund the community and the assets that the community is, right? As far as being able to do the culturally responsive work, the linguistic work, everything, the wraparound work, the community engagement work, right? And not to mention, we also have our experts like Dr. Ray, Dr. Malik, and other folks that are, scientists, right, within our communities. And really, our ancestors are scientists, right? Pacific Islanders are scientists at our core. We might have had a memory lapse about this, but at our core, we are all scientists, right? It takes a scientist to know how to grow a farm, to know how to fish in the ocean, to know how to navigate oceans, right? Like, all of that is scientific, right? And I think when our community is the one that is leading the conversation, having those conversations, and also the cultural protocol is so critical, right? Because other folks don't know how to carry a message to our folks, our community members, that there are particular ways that we carry messages to our members, right? To young people, to elders, to each other, to pastors, to women, to men, right? There's so many nuances about how messages are delivered. You can't just throw a commercial and expect people people to get the science or to get the vaccine. Yeah, and I think that's the complexity that I think we Pacific Islanders have, as Pacific Islanders, as Indigenous people, right, that are still very rooted in our culture.
Yeah,
I think that that's 100% facts. We don't see the commercials. We don't watch CNN. I mean, we don't get our information from CNN. I think Carl and I spoke about this. We look at the faces that are out in the community that look like us, telling us, I think because of our culture, we follow each other. We listen to, the Faife'au tell us, the community leaders like yourself and Dr. Samoa. So I think that's 100% correct. I'm sorry, Carl, I cut you off.
No, not at all, and I 100% agree with that. And I think that's a testament to the level of trust that CBOs have with the community. Is how well are we able to engage them when we need to. And to Dr. Samoa's point, in God we trust, but everybody else bring data. And
That's
if you don't
right.
have data, then you got problems if you don't have the data. So it's these kind of things I think are issues and concepts that are going to pull us forward after COVID's gone. If we're good at gathering our own data, we're good at reaching into our own community. These are are things that we can take forward from it.
Right.
We do have a.
Carl, can I add something on the data note?
Mm-hmm.
So the data note, and I did a paper on NHPI data. Autonomy, but the data is only driven when actually Pacific Islanders demand it, right? When we're sick of not being identified as NH/PI, and when people present on our data and lump us in with Asian, and then we actually make demands, right, and disrupt everywhere we go. It has to be a sustained disruption everywhere we go for us to demand our data. Otherwise, it doesn't even matter if we have the data if we don't have people that are actually in these systems, really just having a unified voice around this, right? And not being passive, because I think, the way the API has stuck around is because we lean into our humility, our get along to get along type of culture in the Pacific community. And I think COVID has taught us that we can't sleep on ourselves and we actually have to sustain this disruption, right? So you actually deserve, you have to tell Pacific Islanders, you actually deserve your data. You belong here. You deserve to know exactly how your people is doing. And if they're not reporting NH/PI data, then you demand that they report it.
Yeah, it's so true with that. If you're an underserved community or population, you don't need proportionate voice because it's already disproportionate. So if you make up 1% of the population, you don't need 1% of voice. You need much more than 1% of the voice because you're 1% of the population. There's already people that just in the natural course of politics and policy and regulation and all those things that already have more voice. So we don't need a disproportionate. We don't need a proportionate voice. We need a much larger voice than our actual population is, so that we get equally served. And I think that you're bringing up a great point that it's got to be a continued disruption, like the typing. It needs to be continued so that it. But you're right. It can't go away after COVID, right? After we get our data and these kind of things, there's, these are the highways we need to continue to populate. So we'll go on with that notion of a continued disruption. We're going to go to a video that we actually have from HHS, and then while we're doing the video, Mena, I'll just keep talking until you go ahead and put the video up, and then at that point we can do our own investigation and see if we can determine where that disruption is coming from. So, and I think the video, Mena, when you put it up, the video is one of those things where we have some form of representation. There needs to be more of it, but now we're actually seeing videos that are directed at our community and trying to get our community involved in the, kind of the move for herd immunity. So if you're watching the video, if you're watching our show, please mute your video. Somebody's doing a lot of note taking, and that's great, but it's a little disruptive to the speakers. Thank you. Go ahead, Mena.
Today, Koviki got his COVID-19 vaccine. That's because everyone 12 and older is now eligible for a vaccine. Kovika then found a vaccine location for his sister. His sister sent an appointment link to her best friend, who reminded her business partner, who then, well, you get the idea. And it all started today with Koviki. Tomorrow, it can start with you. It's time to let our friends and family know that vaccines prevent nearly 100% of hospitalizations and deaths from COVID. We can do this.
Okay.
So, on that note, I don't really like if you argue with people. I don't know that if I'm arguing with somebody that I'm ever going to get them to change their mind, right? I'm not going to just keep telling them no, it's blue, and they're saying no, it's red, and there's no way for me to do that. But I think that people don't change their mind, but people make decisions, new decisions, with new information. It's like you back them into a corner, and then they just kind of dig their heels in. But if we can provide new information for them to make a new decision, then it's possible. And I think that this vaccine hesitancy may be somewhat in that regards, where people have kind of dug their heels in, and there may be a small percentage that we can't change their minds, but for the ones that are able to take in new information and possibly make a new decision about the vaccine and getting the vaccine, is there anything that you think is a misperception or one of the major reasons in the Pacific Islander community, Joseph, that you think you could dispel with new information?
Yeah, that's a good question. Could I throw that to Dr. Ray, and I'll chew on it a little bit, because I think something else is coming to me, but I don't want to divert your question yet.
Yeah.
Carl, sorry, what was your question?
The question was, most people, when you're in an argument and you're trying to get people to see things differently, they don't change their minds. Like, you can argue with them till you're blue in the face, and they're not going to change their mind. If I can give them new decisions or new information, they may make a new decision, right? I'm not going to change their mind. Possibly, if I give them new information, they might make a new decision. In terms of the vaccine, is there information out there that is mostly misperceived, or is there a piece of misinformation out there that we can help dispel, or what do you think is a good foundation to trying to give people more or new information to make a different decision about not getting the vaccine?
I don't know if it's new information. I think we've kind of been, for the most part, from what we understand from the clinical trials and the millions of people that have gotten the vaccine, we know that the side effects are, they can be somewhat. The side effects can include, dizziness, headaches, coughs, but not to the point of hospitalizations. And so the relative safe vaccines, I think, has been sort of said over and over again, by the CDC, by health professionals. I don't know that many doctors who are saying anything different. And if you need proof, anecdotally, our hospital is just one example of the sudden drop in COVID cases. We actually closed our COVID unit last month after overrun in November and December. So the people that choose not to listen to that from our community, I don't know if more information is going to do it. I think it's more about trying to appeal to our bond. What makes us different from the CDC? Because we come from the same village, because we come from the same ocean. That what's affected my family for generations in the U.S. affected yours too. We have similar experiences, and so that bond that we share is deeper than just us checking a box, right?
Right.
So when the reason why I do teaching to Pacific Island communities, I do teaching in Chuuk and in the Marshall Islands, in Hawaii, in Utah, in Washington, in California. The reason why I do it for our people is because I'm one of two Pacific founder endocrinologists in the world, and one on the continent. That's my duty to you, right? Because our cultural bond towards each other basically states that we owe each other to try to keep each other safe, right? What happens when we come to the U.S.? We gather in communities and we try to help each other make it through this really tough life in America. You know, we did it when we build churches. We do it when we develop programs. That's why we have community-based organizations. And so it's time for us to understand that duty, to understand that cultural bond that we share. Because I hear what you're saying, Carl, but people that haven't gotten the vaccine, they don't care about clinical trials. They don't care about my statistics. They don't care about my expert opinion. And so what I appeal to is that emotion. Where does that fear come from?
Right.
And how do we dispel fear in our community? By talking, by engaging each other. Because it's the person that Joseph said that's been providing food for you throughout the pandemic. It's the people that have been setting up these sites for you. It's the people that have been trying to set up these clinics so that Pacific Islanders get vaccinated. That is our obligation to each other. And so that's what I lean on.
Thank you, Dr. Samoa. Go ahead, Naki.
I think that you're right about us having, I don't know if it's sympathy or empathy, but we just listen to each other. I get frustrated when people tell me that I'm going to wait and see how the trials go. And I'm like, but didn't you see, our family member that passed away? Didn't you see me? Like I always, with my family, I go, didn't you see me when I was sick? If that doesn't shake you, seeing all the funerals and it was just a few months ago. Just a few months ago, we were watching funerals on our news feed and we were still gathering. And then, then another funeral from that same family because we gathered and we have to make it clear to our community that we are at high risk and that the vaccine is just really a layer to protect you. Like, I can't even stress enough how deathly ill I was, right? And I'm not trying to over exaggerate. I couldn't breathe. Dr. Samoa was calling me every day to make sure I was doing what I was supposed to do. I just can't make it any clearer. And that's why we do this, right? We bug you guys last minute because we're passionate about trying to save our own people. And it's frustrating for me to hear anyone, especially PI, say, oh, I'm just going to wait, or I'm not going to get it, but what about your dad? What about your mom? What about your kids? You go to work, you don't know what is at work, what you may or may not bring home. So that's why I always praise the work that you guys are doing. Joseph and Malo, and Fahina, Utah, Washington, Oregon, all the work that we're all doing to save us. And going back to the data, I was having a conversation, last month, but at my work, they had a API, celebrating API month, and not a PI was on the panel. And so I was like, we have to fight to get on. We have to fight to be on these panels. We have to fight to get the disaggregated. And so I think you're right about the pandemic, that it's brought our voices louder and we're tired of not being seen. So I 100% believe that it's not just the Samoans, it's not just the Tongans, it's not just the, Chuk and Palauans, it's our ocean, that one ocean that holds us all together. I believe that the pandemic has brought our community, all one community, together to fight this. And I think it's the most beautiful thing that has come out of this pandemic, is that all of us have gotten together. Evai is she's saying we have the highest health disparities, yet no one advocates or demands for services for us, but us. So yeah, that's true. Malo says not a PI is on a panel for AAN NH/PI Heritage Month. So I was just saying that at work, but um, I love that since this pandemic has started, that's all I hear is all of us demanding the data. So I love that. I know it's a horrible thing, but the one thing that I love that came out of this is that our community together is demanding these numbers, is demanding you to look me in the face, is demanding you to see my brown skin. So I'm gonna cry because I always cry when I talk to you guys. Ugh.
Yeah, Naki's 100% hard on sleeve when she talks. There's none of this. No, Naki, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
We know you're speaking from the heart. So on that note, only us can save us.
Okay.
And that's what I was kind of talking about with the funding. I mean, there's a lot of there could be a ton of funding out there, but if that people like Dr. Samoa and Joseph aren't there to administer it and to get it into the community, it's just, it could be wasted. So on that note, how we could save ourselves, this season of Koviki Talk, we are going to be in language. And when we say in language, we're talking about languages that do not have a media vehicle. So Yapis, Kosrayan, and Pingalapis. We are going to have episodes. Naki has worked really hard to speak all of those languages. She's going to be hosting all of these shows coming up. Either that, or we are going to go find. We are going to have people hosting in language so that we're reaching the truly hard to reach Pacific Islanders.
Yeah.
Who's going to reach those Pacific Islanders? We are. Right? We're not waiting for the Department of Health and Human Services or CNN or Fox or somebody to go create a show in Yapis or in any of these languages. We're gonna make the vehicle ourselves, and that's kind of the piece that I think that when we talk about why is King County and why is Multnomah County and why is Salt Lake and all of these areas that are doing well, is because they have strong community members that are trusted there, and these are the kind of things that we need to continue to push and get things in language to people that don't have they don't have shows in language. They don't have access to those kind of media vehicles. So again, we're not waiting for somebody else to do it. We're gonna do it. So when we are not going to speak Yapis and Pingalapis and Kosrayan, we're going to find people that do. But talk a little bit about if both Joseph and Dr. Samoa can talk a little bit about the effects of having in-language messaging to people that don't have that face language barriers, and obviously that's an obstacle to receiving health care, to getting medical care and all those kind of things. You're where the rubber meets the road with the community. How much does it mean to the community? And that doesn't have to be the Yapese community or the ones we're talking about. You work with communities that have language barriers. How much does it mean to have printed material or internet advertisements or shows in language? What does that mean to the people that you work with? We'll start with Mr. King County.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why me and Dr. Nia jokes around API dying due to COVID complications, right? And we really have to be serious about our commitment to really continue to push all of these public health departments and other agencies to fully disaggregate NHPI, right? Because there's so many languages within NHPI, right? That just gets missed, right? In aggregation with API, they only pick one NHPI language, right? Oftentimes. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. We're not going to play the language politics, any, meeny, money, mo, and figure out who's actually going to have the language services that by law is mandated for all of our communities, right? That speak another language other than English, right? And so Yeah, it's so critical. We have folks that have very communities that have significantly low literacy rates, right? And the only thing they can understand is the oral tradition, right? So if they're not hearing anything oral from anybody, right, from a trusted source, they're not getting anything regarding the vaccine. And so, I think a lot of our Micronesian communities, the literacy rates are pretty low, and so we do need to have that oral piece out there. And also, a lot of Samoans and Tongans, that don't understand English, but there's a lot of shame around not admitting that, right? That they actually have language needs, and so those are also two populations that we work really hard with. Our Marshallese community. And then also language as an issue of sovereignty, right? Just because that's you speak English doesn't mean you always want to get your health information in English. Like our Native Hawaiian communities, our Chamorro communities, the elders. They are some of our elders. Speak English but prefer things because it's natural to them to hear it in their language, to read it in their language. So we do have a true commitment to really make sure that we're really mitigating those not just language disparities, but we're also lifting up language sovereignty.
Yeah, I think the language. You know what bugs me about when you say the literacy, people think that there's a connotation with that. Like if you're not literate, you're not intelligent, right? And there's a connotation with that, and it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It means that they don't speak a second language. Like they're just not participating in society because of the language barrier. It's not that they're not intelligent. Like that's the thing that and I think that may be one of the shame things of people know that um, that is the thought of society is illiterate means you're not intelligent, and that it just means you don't speak the language, and if you don't speak the language, you're not fully participating in society. So I love having a policy guy here. Dr. Samoa, how about you in your travels and in your experience? How important is it for communities to have information available in language?
It's huge because it's not just linguistic translation. It's context. Right?
Mm.
There are some concepts in Samoan culture, for example, that just don't translate. And so our understanding of health is kind of shaped in that way. We make amends, like for instance, when you're explaining family relations to a non-Samoan, right?
Mm.
We don't have a word for cousin. Like
Yeah.
I was 40 when people started using the word kasingi. Yeah. Um, we just don't have a word for cousin. We don't have a word for auntie. We don't have a word for uncle. We don't have a word for grandma, grandpa in the traditional sense. Like ours, and it's because our concept of family is not Western.
Yeah.
And so, you know, where, because I have a degree in anthropology, a lot of the way people look at the world is the way you look at your family. So when they describe things in like first cousin, second cousin, twice removed, we don't have that. You know, we have a completely different way we relate to each other. We have blood, we have by name, and then we have by marriage.
Right.
And so just because you're not related by blood doesn't mean that that relationship is any less significant,
Right.
in our culture. And so you take that to the medical field. There's a different understanding of sort of community health when you try to translate it. That doesn't contextually go over very well. And so in language, there's a lot more than just changing words, right? Like Google is only so good, and the way we're able to sort of speak it either and make the vaccines make sense to us, it has to be done with our perspective. And the best way to do that is to do it in language, you know. And so, you know, uh, I might, a lot of times it's like we have two sets of ears, right? If I hear something coming in from English, I have a different set of expectations, I have a different understanding of what I'm about to hear. And then when I hear it in Samoan, I know, like, there's a different kind of contextual dictionary that I'm using, and so I think it's the same thing with other Pacific Island cultures.
Yeah, the language piece is so it's so evident in especially the Polynesian culture, Samoan culture. I was at my uncle's 82nd birthday this weekend, and the cake, the dinner, the blessing. But at the end of the day, after everything settled down, he was just asking for Samoan music to be played so that they could sing in Samoan. Like that's all he wanted at the end of the day. And to see, how happy he was to be, hearing his language and singing in his language, that's just a big piece of the culture. So hopefully we'll be able to open doors up in the Peace, Kosrayan, and Pingala Peace speaking community. It's going to be, it's going to be interesting and heartfelt for Poly by Design and Naki and I to see their own show happening with the host in speaking in language and the guest speaking in language. So if and we'll get, obviously there's going to be promotion out for that, but if the Yapis, Coast Ryan or Pingala Peace speakers, let them know that Koviki Talk is coming in language. And hopefully we end up doing these later this week and next week. We're going to do all 3 languages. And that's really what season 2 is about, is the language. So go ahead, Naki.
I just wanted to shout out people that are tuning in on Facebook. Rhoda Samoa, the famous sister. Manu Malo Alailima from Oregon. Vince Vayelua. Pete Fiso. Jasha Afro-Tana said, a lot of people didn't know they were invisible before the pandemic. It took being on lockdown to realize how much we need to lock into the needs of our Pacifica people. So true. And go check out her podcast. Evi says, how can I help? Should be the answer. Where is the data? Who can we call? And how can we make this happen? If they're trying to, if in your county, you're wanting to disaggregate your number or our numbers, who should they go to? Should they go to their city, Joseph? Or how do you get your numbers disaggregated?
Yeah, I think it's, you have to figure out what the NHPI coalitions is in your region, right? Because I'm pretty sure they're already doing some of that work, right? And sitting at those tables. But it's as easy as figuring out when those meetings happen and show up. And whenever they show you a data graph that like lumps us in with Asian or omits our NHPI data, you actually stop that presentation and you disrupt it and you say, where's the NHPI data? I live here in this county. Where am I? I'm not nowhere located on here. And if they show our numbers, because NHPI is similar numbers as Native American, right? So if they use the justification, oh, you guys are insignificant, it's the same as a Native American, numbers. And that's why I find that argument pretty ridiculous, right? And so I would just. I know this word sounds rough for some islanders out there, but disrupt, and demand NHPI data wherever you go. And whenever somebody is doing some data scientist is doing some data, presenting on data, make sure that you're demanding NHPI data there. And that's with our healthcare providers, public health agencies, and any other agency that is using public dollars, right? That is using our dollars that we pay for in taxes. Yeah, so please acknowledge me, right? Acknowledge our community.
That's right. That's right. I think that's why also we did a big push for the census, because they need to see us and we need to know where you are. And I think the numbers aren't out yet, but I really believe that Pacific Islanders really stepped up to the plate to be seen. And a lot of the data, or a lot of our community, filled out the census. Malo says, or be careful of them lumping NH/PI community in smaller counties as one because we are not large enough. That's true.
Yeah, and I think that's I don't know, and we're not the CBO that deals with this on the ground, but I think it's just
Right.
laziness, right? It's just easier to say, other is this number, and leave it as other instead of breaking it out, um, and seeing
Yeah,
what it
and
is.
Carl and Necky, like there were two counties that we had tremendous populations in, right? And like
Mm,
it literally took like a couple of meetings for them to disaggregate NHPI, you know? And like, that's all it took, right? For us to speak up and for them to actually go back to their data scientist and do this thing for us, right? And so it's not really that much effort either if people are just like, paying attention and just making demands.
right.
Do you think so obviously you've sat at these meetings and spoke these words to decision makers. Do you feel like they felt like it was new that there was a Pacific Islander asking for this? Did they feel like, yeah, we've heard this before? Or what kind of vibe did you get at that table when you're saying these kind of things?
You know, that's a good question. I think, prior to COVID, I don't think we were there were many of us activated and at these tables, right? And so I think they were and then also the folks that were at the table, I think we were kind of, like just taking on the silence of it all, right? But then when you hold each other accountable at these tables, you see other Pacific Islanders, you lift each other up, you support each other, you make sure that you have a team strategy. That's usually like how it works best, because it sucks to be the lone wolf, right? To
Right.
like be the one howling everywhere, but it feels good when you say something and your sister's like texting you, "Good job," and then like there's just this, this collective strategy that I think lives on beyond just it's seeming like the person that's complaining a lot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just give us a seat at the table, or we're just gonna take a seat at the table, really.
Yeah.
Uh, Tana Lepule says, Amene, live together. Hey, Tana.
So the campaign right now, is we can do this, right? That's the big thing for the big kind of the mantra behind the campaign to reach herd immunity. When you hear the words "we can do this" as a Pacific Islander, what does that mean to you? And Dr. Samoa, I mean that's we'll start with you because well, one, because you just got back, but two, we'll start with you because you're the head of the PI, the lead for the task force, and you've been, knee deep in this, in the trenches from day one, and really leading us. When you hear that term, we can do this. What does that mean to you?
Uh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't. For some reason, it's saying I'm muted, but um, we can do this. It's a little more than that, right? Like, because if we can't, there's no one else, right? There's no option B. And so I think that we can do this is more than COVID, right? We can do this means we deserve a better life here.
Right.
We deserve a better shot at happier times for our family. We deserve less incarceration. We deserve better high school graduation rates. We deserve better income. We deserve, there's so many things that we deserve that we trusted other people to do for us, and it never happened. You know, so this we can do it is more than beating COVID. You know, it's we can work towards a better future for us. You know, um, I I think we all have parents that sacrificed and came here on just hope, no money, and a whole lot of love. And uh, our our job to pass on, to carry this torch for our kids is to fight for our place now. You know, we went through the door and we just stayed in the doorway for decades. Um, and so, I like many people got very how shall we say it, the got a little disillusioned, because the work is so huge, that you look at all the we have the worst rates in almost everything, and so when you look at it, it's easy to get tired. It's easy to just sort of focus on yourself and stay in your bubble. But what this pandemic, the lining around this dark cloud has been the renewed faith I have in our future. People like Joseph, who just finished his program, and he's got his master's. People like Malo, people like Melissa Leland, people like Josie, um, you know, people like Nia that bosses all of us around.
Yes.
Pacifico by Design, PBD, like there's and all these like students who've come out of the woodwork. I think the pandemic has made me bigger fans of our social media crowd, and their influence. But they've all like put in their oar in the water to
Mm.
help drive us to a better place. And so with that, I'm unbelievably grateful that I can say we can do this now.
Wow, there's a lot to think about with that, and I think that's probably the way that we need to think about it, and
Right.
not look at this being short term, and kind of to Joseph's point that it's a continued disruption. Like this isn't going to. There's not a finish line in sight where we're going to say, hey, we've arrived. Um, so Joseph, are you are you ready now that you're done studying? I'm assuming done studying. Congratulations, new holder of a master's degree, and I'm sure you're breathing a little easier now that you're done with that. Um, what we can do this. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think when I initially hear it, I kind of feel like I have a chip on my shoulder, right? I'm like, no, we did this. You didn't. You had nothing to do with the we, right? It's kind of like the exclusive we in the Pacific language, mato, not tato, right? But I mean, the 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 boundary, the what separates from me from the next person is so artificial, right? And we know that because of COVID, right? That our health is dependent upon the health of the people around us, right? Our ecology, right? And when you asked the question earlier, Carl, about if is there something extra that people need to know about that will make them get the vaccine, the first thing that comes to mind is, how about we decolonize some of the toxic behavior that we've adopted, here in the U.S., right, where it's like, dog eat dog world, right, where like it's all about me. Oh, I'm gonna do me, you do you, right? This rugged individualism that has really, I think, disrupted our Pacifica center and our core, which has always been grounded in the other, right? It's always been grounded in the community, in the elders, in the sacred relationship between the brothers and the sisters, right? In the belief that everybody has a place and you have a duty to that community and that place that you belong to, right? You are not on your own, so island, on your own island, right? And that's where I'm actually trying to drive our people back to, right? And I think the last like 4 years of just nasty, dirty politics, right, that our people have been hyper exposed to, where it's this dog eat dog world, right? We have to reject that and say that is not part of our fabric as Pacific people. We actually have another fabric, right? That is a lot more sacred, right? That thinks about life as sacred, right? And also, yes, we have gotten vaccinated, not for us. We got vaccinated to save those babies that were dying from measles, right? Got vaccinated to save, everybody else in the village that weren't able to save themselves, right? So it's like, I just I think relationships is something that will drive the change. If Pacific people have the opportunity to deepen the relationships with each other, relationships that are centered on wellness and care, I think we can do this as a community.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I love
Your mouth, sweet.
the
Right?
we can do this, right? Like
Oh, he's
we
not done yet, too. He's not done with studying. There's a plan for Joseph.
Yeah.
Well, it's
By
an honor
Aka.
it's an honor to sit front row and see the people that we see week after week, and see the work that people like you two do. Um, it is, Naki and I get a front row seat to seeing these things happen, and that's what we joke about. Hey, it's a new way to look at Monday because every Monday we get to end our Monday by talking to amazing people. But
Yeah.
it is, when we say it's an honor to, share space or, see Joseph juggling 85,000 things and then getting a master's degree
Mhm.
and, doing all the things that he's doing, those are things that people, they may not know everything that's going on behind the scenes and how much that goes into that, but they see, they see our people winning. And that's what, that's what, Koviki Talk has every week is Pacific Islanders on here talking about winning in life in whatever, whatever journey they're on. Um, so, I didn't know how Joseph could follow up Dr. Samoa's speech. And then he did. He followed that up with just as an inspiring
Yes.
rendition of what, what we can do this. Myself, it's we. And when I say, we can do this, I just look at the people that are on the, on our screens and our guests and say, you're we. And we get to participate and see that happen. So, Naki, we are an hour has flown by, and you're always the one to take us out of here and take us home. But thank you, Joseph and Dr. Samoa, for coming on. And I think we gave you 22 hours notice, if that.
It's an honor to be on.
Always come through.
It's an honor to be there, to be on episode 1 of season 2. I'm excited.
I like this new setup. It's oh my goodness. You got like comments and flashing graphics. I didn't even know it's gonna be this formal. I would have where's my aloha shirt? I don't even
I
have,
know. And Joseph is matching the scenery.
I know.
right? That's so Joseph.
Thank you
I know.
so much. But the reason why we highlight and that our people, our community, is so that they can see there's a doctor that looks like you. There's a community leader that got his master's that looks like me. And I think that's why you're inspiring and saving lives, is because you're showing the community that we can do whatever we put our mind to. We thank you for stepping up all the time. Thank you for, all the work that you're doing to save our people, all of our people, the whole ocean, not just Samoans, not just Tongans, just the whole Pacific Ocean. Thank you for the work that you do, Dr. Samoa. Joseph, thank you so much for the work that you do. We are honored to have you on. Thank you so much for answering my text message begging. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much. We are here every Monday, season 2, Koviki Talk, every Monday, 5 p.m. Please join us every week. Thank you so much.
Love you.
Oi, Mina.
Today, Kavika got his COVID-19 vaccine. That's because everyone 12 and older is now eligible for a vaccine. Kavika then found a vaccine location for his sister. His sister sent an appointment link to her best friend, who reminded her business partner, who then, well, you get the idea. And it all started today with Kavika. Tomorrow, it can start with you. It's time to let our friends and family know that vaccines prevent nearly 100% of hospitalizations and death from COVID.